Bienvenue dans ce nouveau dialogue CONNECTAS. Aujourd'hui, nous allons parler de la situation
To
sécuritaire
this new dialogue, and also we're going to put in the way that we are going to have a region.
à cette conversation
We
en
are
provenance
going
des
to congratulate the 134 people that are registered and that come from different parts of the world. This is something that is going to be done thanks to the International Partnership for Journalists, CONNECTAS, and we are very interested because that's part of our mission. To be able to ensure a better understanding of the region. And also we're trying to see if there have been power abuses through, and we would like to invite you to ask questions throughout this dialogue. You have in the inferior part of the screen, you have the opportunity to intervene in the chat. You can participate, and this would also be transmitted by Twitter and other social media. I am the manager of CONNECTAS, and it's a pleasure to be able to invite you to meet. We're going to have Manuela de Jour, who is the manager of the Ideas Lab. Good afternoon, Manuela.
Nous avons aussi Katie Julian, directeur exécutif de l'Institut.
And we also have the executive director of democratic education that promotes the values through education.
Nous avons
Good afternoon.
Il est docteur
And we also have Edward Robertson, who is a researcher in matters associated to inequality and poverty. And he is also in charge of public policy and violence. Good afternoon, welcome, and it's a pleasure for having you here. And okay, now we're going to give the word to Maria Camila Hernandez, who works with CONNECTAS, and that during this, and it's going to be the moderator of such an interesting and important conversation. Maria Camila, the floor is yours. Thank you so much, Indira. And for starters, I would like to thank you for being here. I would like to remind you that we have Emmanuela Jean, who is the president of the Political Ideas Lab, who is a specialist in urbanism and development. And Mr. Julian, who is the executive director of the Mobile Democratic Education Institute, and that has been working for many years with us. Mr. Robertson Edward, who is a PhD in sociology, it's also here with us. These three panelists are going to help us understand the current reality in Haiti. Thank you so much for being here and for participating in this conference with CONNECTAS. To be able to make a very brief introduction, I would like to ask some of our speakers, according to you, what's the main reason by which there's such a level of insecurity in the citizens in Haiti? Ms. Julian, I would like to ask you, what would be the main reason why there is so much of insecurity in Haiti? Okay, I think that it's because of political instability, social inequality, the social fracture, and the levels of poverty in the population as well. This is something that it's new and that makes reference, it's something new that makes reference to this specific government, or it's something much more historical that comes from the past? Well, I think that for a couple of years, and I think that since 1986, the levels of security have worsened in Haiti, and it's even worse because of these issues that we have with gangs. The incompetence of the state, it's at fault. Mr. Edouard, do you agree with this answer given to us by Madame Julien? Yes, I totally agree with what Madame Julian says. It's a proven fact, both from the scientific and also point of view, and also in public opinion. This this lack of capacity of the state is systematic and generates a social fracture, what Madame Julian called inequality. In the city, this social differences between the elite and the vast majority of the population. It's expanding and it's now turned into violence. It's true, it can no longer be tolerated, and the insecurity, it's basically the expression of this violence, that it's tolerated, that it's been tolerated up till now. But the truth is that it surpassed a threshold. It surpassed a threshold that means that many people can no longer tolerate it. The people don't want it, cannot support this. And we also have a problem of inequality in the city, and this is it's another of the roles that has not been fulfilled by the state. We have a legal system that doesn't work because there's a lot of manipulation, or and also because the members that generate violence are part of the criminal system, and that this means that we need to find solutions. People have to find their own solutions because the law cannot provide any kind of solution to this issue. And therefore, the thing is that people try to do what they can on their own. That's the norm, and that's what generates this chaos and generalized insecurity situation that we are aware of. Thank you so much. Therefore, we can say that inequality and that the role of the state are very important factors to be able to explain the current situation. Madame Dujon, I would like to know if you're ready for your answer. I am so pleased to be here. I heard what my colleagues said, but I do think that before anything, besides all the other factors that have already been mentioned, I think that impunity is one of the most important factors of this violence, because there's no way in which we can tell the violent people to stop. I think that the fact that the state doesn't do anything, that we have there's organ trafficking, there's so much crime that has been enhanced because there's impunity. So, okay, thank you, Ms. Duchamp. Now we're gonna talk about some elements that have already been mentioned, but now we're gonna have like a landscape of this that you've just mentioned, and we're going to talk about the gangs, which is the main topic for today. According to you, why are gangs so strong? Why have they become so strong during the last period? And what do you think is the cause? Well, it's the absence. What's the absence of having state infrastructure in the poor neighborhoods? There's no school, there are no doctors' offices. There is a total lack of opportunity for the young people. There's a lot of unemployment, as I was telling you. It's a total lack of state infrastructure. We can say that this is something that it also happens because of the lack of economic opportunities. Yes, there are no economic opportunities for the young. We know that, and most of the youngsters want to leave the country. They go to Brazil, and because there are no opportunities, there is unemployment. There are no cultural centers. There are no utilities either in these poor neighborhoods. Mr. Edouard, what's your point of view about this? Well, in part, I agree, of course, I agree, but I would like to say that if we observe that dimension of insecurity, it's associated with criminality, and the criminal dimension of insecurity, because we also have another dimension of insecurity. I think that the criminal dimension, it's the tip of the iceberg, because the truth is there are resources, but the thing is, how do we share our resources? There are people that appropriate of most of the resources in the countries, and therefore the gangs are participating in they're being part of a formula that want to benefit these elite groups to be able to hoarding all the natural resources of the country. There are no scruples, and we have only 7 families that control the whole market of cement and iron in the country. And therefore, in this case, we could be able to see what are the gangs that the truth transport this product from one point to the other in the country. But who is the intellectual leader of this? Because these are people for whom this groups works. They are their bosses. And the problem of insecurity lies there. There's a small number of people that wanted to hoard most of the economy of the country, and that they use it on their own benefit. And we have youngsters that are brainwashed to participate in this type of activities. If you are okay, there is a small number of families that control the most of the richness of the country, and that control the most productive sectors in our economy. Quite a long ago, an economist talked about a replacement in the country, because there are certain operators that try to take the place of others in very well-known sectors, like, for example, electricity, power, and manufacturing. There are some operators that take advantage of this, and that don't want others to participate. And they use the same methods, to take advantage of these resources. There's a lot of violence, and the youngsters are participating. They're part of this. They are being used. They're being given weapons,
Merci.
and they are sent. They're sent to serve their bosses. Madame Dujon, what do you think about what he said? Yes, I think Mr. Robertson said something which is true. There are so many political and economical interests that are evil. And when we talk about from the economic standpoint, we have to say that this is a poor country, and the middle class, it's very small. There is a big number of the population that it's in a very big poverty situation. And the people that have a lot of money in the rich sectors are also scarce. We all need we all need to eat. We all need to fulfill our basic needs, and therefore there is a struggle. There is a struggle to keep alive, and also to control those economic sectors in the best way possible. And the way that they access to these resources, it's through violence. It's the way to get access to resources, and therefore they make the competitors run away. They make the businessmen run away. They do all kinds of actions. And parallelly, there are many youngsters that don't have alternatives. They have minimal opportunities, and if the young people don't know where to look for, they have no ideals, and therefore those gangs can grow easily. It's notorious. Also, we would have to say that this is something that it's attractive for youngsters, even if it's risky. However, when they are armed, they are more protected than the rest of the population. In Haiti, we are lately seeing that those things have worsened and all those conditions have favored the development in certain way. It's an explanation of the increase of this number of gangs. You talked about impunity. What are the real causes of impunity that the well-known criminals enjoy?
Je crois que c'est la corruption
Okay,
systémique.
I think that it's this systemic corruption, and also that many authorities are accomplice, and also some business sectors. Justice, in general, the legal system doesn't work. And it's all of this. And I think that these are the real causes that benefit, these kinds of criminals.
Monsieur Edouard, que pensez-vous de ça?
Mr. Edouard, what do you think about this, about impunity in Haiti? What do you think? Well, I think that this is a very complex issue. There is a very serious corruption issue. In the legal sector as well, it's corrupt, but aside from this, we're talking also about law. And the main problem is the legal insecurity. There are laws that are dictated from abroad and that they reflect the ways the population thinks. The law has a coercive force when it's been adopted. Therefore, we have laws that have not been applied because they don't reflect the idiosyncrasy of the population or its values. On a second moment, we have participants in the legal system that, because of their ridiculous work conditions, are not capable of living on their own wages, their own salaries. They can't make it with their own salaries. And therefore, as part of, and in the claims, we never talk about the salaries of those people. People talk about privileges and advantages, but nobody talks about salary raises and salary adjustments to be able to achieve proper legal conditions. Legal insecurity is something that can be related with the lack of protections of the different agents that want to work. And how can this do? Who can protect them? Well, a legal officer, a justice of peace, a member of a court that wants to do their work and that they live in a very poor neighborhood. How are they going to do this? If we don't attack the problem in a general manner, it's going to be difficult. And another thing that I want to mention, and this is something, and here I'm going to stop. And this is, and that explains impunity, is how can we apply the law when most of the people that create these laws, it's corrupt, and everybody knows there is corruption. And people that need to apply this law, how can they make law go against them? And because if the people that represent the law are also represent corruption, they don't abide the law either. I would like to highlight the topic of the gangs. How do these gangs work in the different neighborhoods, especially in the capital city? Ms. Duyon, I would like to ask you something. Apparently, the territory, it's more fragmented by the time. There's more division. Each gang has its own territory, and especially in Provence. Could we say that there's There's a fast disappearance of the neighborhoods in this state. I said it, yes. There is a lack, there's a total lack of state infrastructure. They don't exist. There are there are no there are no cultural centers, there's no schools, and there is a very high unemployment level. What do you think about this issue? We can say that for a long time, the government doesn't do anything in these areas, and these areas don't know the state. The state don't control them. They don't manage security in these areas. And also because families control these territories. Therefore, if you ask a 15-year-old, he could give you a map of the current situation. He could mention what gang is dominating what territory. We know that. We know who manages each area, who's in control of each area. But the state doesn't have the means or is interested in this. The citizens are controlled by these gangs, and they have to live with them. There is a problem of living together because these gangs, in a certain way, they're filling up the void the state has left in these areas. And the citizens of these neighborhoods are being controlled. Even the national roads are being controlled. We can't leave Port-au-Prince to go to the country without being worried of going through certain places that are hotspots and that are controlled by gangs. To be able to move southwards, it's the same thing. We need to ask a lot of questions. Can I go through this road? Can't I go through this road?
Merci.
The control is notorious. And with regards to these neighborhoods, there is the image of the benevolent criminal that favors development. What do you think about this image of the benevolent gangster? Is this a reflection of the Haitian society? Well, thank you so much for this question. And I would like to take a minute to go back to what has been mentioned, that the gangs rebuilt the map of the country. They were able to divide the circulation of goods and people in the country. We need to stop for a minute and understand the underlying logic, and it's associated to economic efficiency. We can see all the different stakeholders that are behind all the requests and the new map that has been drawn. I don't have time right now to go into detail in such a complex issue, but the question that I've been asked about the role of the community agents, of the development agents, of certain gang leaders, we need to take this to this history of these new groups, to the background of these new groups, because this derives from a first experience that was the neighborhood committees that were like vigilantes groups that back in the day were working for the communities. And there were many gangs that started to come out, as a result, as an extension of these type of organizations that were a way of self-protection. And as politics is involved in these kinds of social and community organizations, they transform in criminal groups. And once the gangs work in criminal activities, that's the way, and therefore they have to find a way to become legit at the eyes of the community, and that's why they think that they say that they're advocating for their community. That how? Showing that they work well, and people and the gangs end up protecting the communities from other gangs, from other gangs and other communities. For example, when we talk about the collective raping of girls or women, if a woman, if someone goes through a neighborhood that doesn't belong to her, she's at risk, and therefore the community finds like a type of agreement with these type of organizations because of this. But this is not enough, because the gang also takes advantage of the void, of the vacuum of the state, of the inexisting state, and they offer their services. No, in quotes, for this kind, for the citizens. For example, they participate and they help paying for funeral expenses, for example, and they also work in social protection because the state doesn't do that. And therefore, now I'm going to give the floor to the others, but if you want, I can further expand on the topic because it's a very relevant one. Well, thank you so much. And now I'm going to ask you a couple of questions for the audience, from the audience. Yes, there are several participants that want to ask about the role of journalists in these questions. Journalists need to give voice to the leaders of the gangs. What do you think about the role of the journalist in this situation?
Moi, je pense que les journalistes, les grands journalistes.
Well, I think that journalists, that the real journalists that are interested in the topic in a professional manner, find a very difficult context, because to be a journalist in Haiti, it's very difficult. The conditions are very difficult. And there are so many diseases, as we currently know, and it's a very risky topic. I would say that it's difficult that journalists can work that they can. We sometimes listen. Some people go to the neighborhoods and we listen to things in radio and TV, to these representatives of these gangs. We sometimes we listen to them, but this is a way of terrorizing the population, and therefore I think that we shouldn't give them voice. But I think that the journalists need to keep on describing what's happening without giving a voice to them and what these gangs do, as much as they can. And in the society, there should be a debate about the status of the journalists. How would it be a journalist awarded if he does some kind of research of what's going on, or how can they be supported? How can they be protected? I think in cases, in a very specific case about a journalist that did a very important report about the activities of the gangs. We don't know what happened with her case because it's currently being it's being treated by the justice. There's a lot of risks, and we need to have elements that motivate or encourage journalists to do their job, or to or allow them to say what is happening, and avoid giving an echo to the threats of the gangs for the population. What are we doing to protect journalists, because they can also be victims of injustice? Thank you so much. There are so many questions for you. Well, very interesting question here. What do you think about that collaboration that we currently have between the state and these gangs in the neighborhoods? I remember cases in which the state structures. Okay, thank you so much for this question. I think that the link between the gangs and the state, the links that we have between politics and criminal organizations, it's a very tight link. First of all, let's listen to let's check out to the state. How do we access to power in Haiti? The political regime that we have, it's based on state elections. That's the mechanism for access state elections. Unless then we see that the electoral maps of the city and also the territories where the gangs operate. I think that there is an association, and there are reports that shows how political powers work with gangs to be able to have an access to space where there's a very important electoral group. So they do gang wars or they do whatever it's necessary to be able to have control of those electoral spaces. One of the very interesting manners why the link between the state and the gangs, it's very tight, and also the economic parties that have influenced the political parties by funding their elections. They also have gangs that work for them, the theater of operations for the gangs benefits people with impunity, especially the ones that have been elected with the money of those economic stakeholders, and of the influence of that gang associated to those political groups. Then this happens in many territories. Another question, Madame Bouchon. How can the state avoid Facebook from publishing what the gangs say? Do you think this can be a solution? Do you think it can help if Facebook stops publishing them? Unfortunately, because of my experience, Facebook is not very reactive when we talk about blocking fake news or all these kinds of non-convenient statements. But I think it's hard.
De ne pas essayer de suivre ce que font ces derniers.
And maybe the population can be suggested not to follow, but of course there is a curiosity which is natural, and if we are able to contain this a little bit from the state, that would be a step forward and it would help. To fight against these campaigns that are orchestrated by the gangs. A lot of people have talked about these publications, and a lot of people ask questions, and this confuses the landscape a little bit. And of course, there are statements and there are some journals that that like to give them a voice. Okay, I want to finish my first series of questions with the last questions. How the citizens can overcome these challenges that and the demand for the state to be liable for its actions. Mr. Edouard, could you please answer this question? That's a hard question for me. If we knew, we would have done it already, maybe. Having said this, there are things that need to be considered. The first thing is that is the citizens. We have a country where we don't know who's who, and where it's very and we have addressed identity when there are complex identities, there are complex challenges because there are no limits, and also the control of the territory. Yes, we're not capable of being able to have a very good knowledge about the territory and to have the presence of the state in all the territory. That is also an issue. And that's why any group nowadays, now we were the gangs. In the past, there were other areas that infiltrated this. Therefore, if we wanted to work together, the state needs to dominate the territory. We need to have a control of the territory. And I think that's the heart of the issue. How can we control these borders when even the concept of the border control project doesn't exist? There's no sovereignty, and we also need international funding to be able to work in the sense of border control with the different institutions and to be able to implement elements that are essential for the defense of sovereignty. And the last thing, it's the national integration. And as long as we have individuals that continue considering themselves excluded from the possibility of having access to natural resources and to the power spaces, when we have individuals that consider themselves excluded and that they feel that they cannot express their needs, will not be able to find a solution. Ms. Dujon, what do you think about this? They do what they can. They're poor, they're terrorized, they're terrified, and they're not even capable of reacting right now because there's so many risks. I think that we need to make a lot of pressure over the authorities at the community level, because those gangs are acting, and they're attacking the population itself. They're against them. There is a partnership between political sectors and gangs. And I think that it's the population, the one that should set this straight and make the government be accountable. But the population, it's impoverished, it's terrified. Right now they can't do anything because they feel blocked. Okay, you talk about some parties or events that may help the current situation in Haiti. Okay, we've already talked about this topic. Ms. Duyon, we've talked about these groups that control power in the country. But is it possible that there is competition between new stakeholders and the new stakeholders and the old stakeholders and the new stakeholders in economic sectors like oil and power? Or is this always in the hands on the same groups that currently control power? Competition, there is competition, but not about market laws, of course. At the end, it's like the economic logic. It's like if we use market economies to adopt new rules, and there are these new rules that want that dictate the economy. It's not a better price what manages or that generates an influence. It's not price, for example. It's deviating the cargo of others. It's not an economic logic. It's not a traditional economic logic. It's other kinds of logic. And this is something that concerns me. When we listen, for example, when we hear about how much money it's circulating, every time that I listen to the amounts, I ask myself the same questions. What happens to this money? Where is this money going to? it is reinjected to the economy, yes, but where, to do what? And when you ask yourself one question, we can see the very tight link that there should be between organized crime in this industry and all the economic stakeholders. There are no data, there is no effective data. This is a hypothesis, but of course society will be able to make a lot if we do an analysis of this criminal economy to understand how these financial flows work and understand what are the associations, the symbiosis that we have between these criminal industries and the real or formal economy. Thank you so much. Ms. Dujon, there is no question that the earthquake, had an effect on Haiti. Do you think that there is an association between this earthquake and the the extensive growth of armed groups? Okay, I have no data to be able to answer to this question, but there are factors that make us think that there is a big part of the population that can be affected by this and that have difficulties to be able to make an earning. Of course, after the earthquake, this population increased, and this could explain this phenomena of gang violence that has increased. It is a possibility, but after the earthquake, there was a lot of money circulating in the country. There were a lot of opportunities that were there, for the rebuilding. How were those sectors coordinated? And this is something that can explain that there is a reinforcement of the situations because there was circulating money and that it wasn't controlled as it should have. A lot of opportunities were lost. And also being able to be directly linked to this. Because the earthquake and after all these challenges that came forward, the help that had to get to the territories probably didn't get, the aid that was supposed to get there didn't get there. And maybe there is a relationship between this because of course there was a reduction in the number of police officers. There was a decrease in the number of police officers in the country. For example, I was in Port-au-Prince before and I came and I saw a lot of changes. I was away for a couple of years and I saw so many changes. Those kinds of catastrophes, brought so much money to the country. And with money circulation, there were also a lot of possibilities of doing money laundering. And there was an increase in the corruption levels as well. And therefore, in consequences, of course, there's an increase in the number of gangs and criminals. A very significant stakeholder in Haiti is the UNO. Do you consider that the international forces that are currently stationed in Haiti, do you think that they represent a factor of stability or instability in the country? How do you see them and how do you analyze them? I'm going to ask the question to Mr. Eduard. What do you think about this current situation, about the presence of the UN And the presence of the UN, it's a way in which this is this something that supports the government? Is it an element of stability? Well, it depends on how you see it. One could say that it's support for the government, but there is something that it's so clear. Let's go back to the mission that was in the year 2000, and as the word will say, that mission that was looking for the stabilization of the country, we need to acknowledge that there are reports that the country is what you want to call it, but stable. They did implement some initiatives that meant that caused a reduction in violent communities. There are results that have been mitigated, but there's something that is so clear, and it is that violence was reduced in Haiti. They did implement group dismantling strategies, demobilizing groups. Had never been so many weapons in the country. Despite of all these actions, there had never been so armed groups as now, despite all these activities. And the members of these groups increased. That's the reality. If we just talk about that, there's something very clear, is that the UN in Haiti didn't do what it said that it was going to do, after having invested so much money, after so many efforts were deployed. And we can't forget, after so many dead people that died for cholera, people that died in some neighborhoods, people that died because it was necessary to neutralize some groups, and the final outcome has been the same, because we have a country that is much more unstable than before. Now I'm going to include a question, a very common question, if for the audience, for our two panelists that are here with us. How can we solve the problems of gangs in Haiti without using force? And how can we favor their integration into the society? Madame Dujon, what do you think about this? Well, I'm not a specialist in security. Therefore, I couldn't give an answer, but I do think that, and I do know that in the past there were campaigns that contributed. We had disarmament campaigns in the past. Therefore, I do think that it's possible to do it, avoiding more dead people, more victims, and of course, innocent lives lost. I also think that we need to the violence. We need to try to shut down the violence of the gangs, and we need to avoid youngsters to being part of those gangs through awareness programs, and also through means that avoid those gangs to control them. We've tried to do this. We already have right now. We have very high criminal rates. However, I think that we can still do things, not through force, but we need political will to do this. What do you think? What have you tried to do, like a federation, like a union, something that as a way to negotiate with gangs? Yes, you've tried to do it, but it didn't work, right? I think that failed. That didn't work as expected. the
Ce qui s'est passé, ils ont renforcé ces gangs, ils ont renforcé
I think
perception
that this
puissance que
gangs were not managed in the most appropriate manner.
les
And I
policiers,
think that
les
we
forces de l'ordre,
minimize the action of the state and of the and this is terrible. I think it was a proper way of acting, and this was done like in in any way possible,
des mois après,
and it was a failure.
aucun moyen, ils n'ont pas contrôlé ça,
Nothing was done,
ils n'ont pas limité les activités de G9
and they didn't limit
comme résultat.
the
Avant
number
d'être
of participants, and no, there are no interesting results to show.
qu'est-ce que la population gagne de tout ça?
What has the state acquired? What has the population acquired with this? Have the life conditions of the population changed because of this? No.
Monsieur Edouard, que pensez-vous de ça?
Mr. Edouard, what do you think about this? What do you think about this solution, or what the solution, or what can be done for this situation?
Disons que l'aspect recommandation et programmation, c'est pas ma force.
We can say that the recommendations is not my specialty. I prefer to work more in analysis. I do analysis of challenging issues, and over is the issue when you are able to understand the dynamics, when you're able to understand what's going on. There are certain leverages that can be used. We don't produce weapons, weapons. Gangs don't work without weapons. Therefore, I think it's to control the entrance of weapons to the country. We would need to stop this counterfeiting of weapons. We need to stop. That's one thing. Number two, we need to avoid that this group, because all the armed groups in the country seem to be gangs, are considered as gangs. All of them are considered gangs. And this is something that, but it would be great if we could differentiate them and understand what type of organizations are present with those armed groups, to be able to see which ones have blood crimes and which don't, and the ones that are involved in blood crimes. I'm so sorry, but the law should act immediately. And we, of course, we can promote disarmament, we can promote reinsertion programs, but we will never have a social cohesion if the population keeps on protecting the killers, the ones that massacred the families, that they raped their siblings. Impunity, it's a part. No impunity, it's part of the solution. Sorry, I'm going to say it in another way. Punishment, it's part of the solution. Number three, that I would say regarding the search of a solution, and as the second thing, there's nothing. It's false to say that all the gangs are the same. It's true that some individuals that are unemployed, that didn't have resources, are part of gangs, yes, but the economy of the gangs has nothing to do with the economy of the individuals. If a person can make 50,000 a year for kidnapping a people, what can we promote from the point of view of social reinsertion? For example, therefore we need to avoid this kind of things. We need to clarify to be able to do whatever it's necessary, because of course there are actions that need to be identified, and we need to act in each case according to the type of each group. Thank you so much. Okay, we're about to finish off soon, and as a conclusion, I am going to ask a last question about the role of the state, that as we have said, about insecurity in Haiti, the role of the state. Okay, one of the biggest challenges is to create a state that it's capable of managing its own resource surges into supplies, services, education, employment, mobility, health. Because why, according to you, this hasn't been possible until now, Ms. Dujon? Well, there's a lot of waste in this state. The corruption that has been mentioned, for many years now, those are the main causes that makes the state, incapable. And what has, and wasn't given, hasn't given the population access to education and some basic needs to be able to satisfy the needs of the most vulnerable situations, or the most vulnerable population. Sorry, we haven't been able to accomplish that. And it's also a problem of resources, but basically resource management, corruption. Even, even even if we helped this population, those isolated population a little bit, we'll be able to achieve something. But what we observe is that the state, it's not committed. If we, for example, talk about the parliament, this is not a place where laws are made. No, it's just a place where corruption takes place, and when they manage very sad corruption stories. There is no vision of the role of the citizen in the development of the country. And that's it. Monsieur Edouard, what do you think about this? What's your opinion?
L'État haïtien s'est constitué contre la nation haïtienne, contre la population haïtienne.
Okay, do you? Yes, I work.
L'expression de cet État-là, les différents appareils de l'État.
Okay, in the expression of the state, and also the state works according to a logic, which is the paternalistic state. The state is the one that allows a state that favors and that allows to enrichness.
Je le disais tantôt, peu importe.
And the state tries to take advantage of public monies. In Haiti, the important thing is to have the advantages, to have the privileges. That's why they achieve power, to have the power associated to, and the population. It's way back when we talk about priorities. Whenever there are elections, whenever we need to renew these people, they only go to the population, and the best contact that this population can have with this kind of people, it's with votes.
Qui se déploie.
And therefore, we are going to keep on having this model of state. If we're going to keep on having this state model, we're going to have this kind of population that is feel forgotten and whose needs are not fulfilled. There's one last question from the audience, which I think it's very important. I don't know who of you would like to answer. There are links between the gangs and international networks or international cartels like Jalisco or similar from other countries. What do you think? Is there an association between gangs and criminal organizations, transnational organizations?
Plusieurs rapports qui font
état. Of course, there are a lot of reports that show us that there are very tight relationships within the members of certain gangs, and deported, that have been deported for transnational crimes in the country, and especially people that are in the US or in Canada. And these reports tells us how the deportations reinforce criminal organizations in Haiti and feed the different criminal networks, as well as weapons trafficking, as well as drug dealing, money laundering, and recently enough trafficking, people trafficking. Ms. Dejean, would you like to give your opinion, or would you like to add something else? No. I think there is a relationship. In the North America, there are relationships with criminal organizations in North America, as well mentioned by Monsieur Edouard. And I think that there are very strong links with the people that have been deported. That's what I know. Okay, thank you so much. Okay, to finish off, I would like to know very briefly what's your final conclusion about you as speakers, about all this manners, what ideas would you leave us, to take home and to keep on thinking about this? Madame Dujon, what would you say? What would you add? Well, thank you so much, and I wanted to congratulate for all the ones that have organized this dialogue, because this thing about insecurity, it's very important, and we need to have actions about it. And this is something that generates a lot of suffering for the population from the financial, social perspective. Nowadays, the gangs have a much more influence on everything, they decide the rights people are entitled to, the rights to circulate, the rights to do things, and the quality of the product. It's also because there's no safe competition. And they pay more for utilities because they're very set groups, also at the level of education, health, everything, it's deteriorated. And we live in fear, we live in uncertainty. The middle class has no money, and I don't even want to mention the poor. So those are the direct consequences about all this, about in us in the region. And this is something that it's even more important that we act on all areas. The journalist helps us so much to clarify this scenario, and we need to understand the challenges and what it's relevant. Mr. Edouard, what would be your final comment? Well, in the first place, my first comment is to thank you that organized this session and that has allowed me to exchange ideas with the other speakers. I would like for us to keep on talking about this amongst the colleagues. What we have also seen here about the insecurity in Haiti clearly indicates that the country is in a very deep crisis. And this is not only associated to Haiti and its populations, but also the region. And it's affected in the world, also get affected. It's a very critical situation because any individual nowadays, because of the democratization of terror, everybody lives in fear of being the victim of one of other aspect of insecurity. I am really worried about young people and about children because when they start growing up,
les amène à un train de vie, les amène à
they need to manage their daily lives, and that's why they need to work in things that, you know, they need to have concerns that children and teenagers shouldn't have. I'm also so worried about women, because most of the time women are in this competition for power. They're considered as a prize. And I also worry about young men whose bodies are used as targets to be able to, of calming the thirst of power of the powerful. But besides all this, I do see an opportunity for change in the country. Never, never the issues of the country have been so notorious, and never had there been such an opportunity for being able to achieve a real change. We've never had that opportunity of making this big change. So I'm hopeful, as we say in Haiti, when when at the darkest moment of the night, it's when the sun starts to rise. Of course, there's a lot of hope for the region, because this is a problem that affects Latin America as well. Okay, we have finished this conversation. Thank you so much for your participation and for the interest that you've given to such a complex topic in insecurity in Haiti. Thank you so much, Ms. Dejean. And I'm sorry for having lost our connection with other speakers, and we do hope that in a coming event to have their participation. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Uh, Thank you so much to the speakers and to the attendees. And we do hope to have us in our next Connect event, and to keep on analyzing the reality of a region. So see you soon. Thank you so much.